Part 45. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 442. Outside the refuge hut rising from the ground, the barbarian elders looked at the outer wall of the hut and talked about it. Why doesn't he just use healing techniques? Treatment may not be useful, right? I treated one, and the treatment relieved him for a long time, but he still died later. Actually, it's better to let the bear god bless you. Warriors who have been blessed by the bear god have stronger resilience and can endure more serious injuries. With one blessing, they can digest what they originally had to eat. Is it okay for the deer spirit to give me blessings? Is the giant enlargement technique possible? Your whole body has become bigger. Before, your stomach was holding up and you couldn't vomit it out. Now that it's bigger, you should be able to vomit it out. No matter which method you use, you don't have to cut open your stomach, right? Who knows? But that healer is so slow. Amidst the chatter and complaints, the walls of the refuge cabin suddenly started to turbulence like water waves. Sarah directed a floating saucer, which contained a large basin full of stomach contents, and walked back to the hall, looking around. Where did he fall? Immediately, 3 or 5 elders jumped up to show her the way, and 2 elders ran out to call for people to get pots and buckets. There were also 2 elders who used magic to gather the flames on the brazier and pointed out the red and hot charcoal below. The previous discussions and complaints were as if they had never existed. Sarah moved the floating dish to the charcoal basin nearby and lifted it easily. There was a crash, and the unpleasant sour smell immediately rose together with the burnt smell. The hall was filled with people instantly. The one who retreats backwards, the one who covers his nose, the one who calls for the wind calls for the wind. What does this smell like? It's 10 times stronger and 100 times worse than the smell of drunken vomiting. Only Sari Raman never changes color. Before the operation started, she had applied a bubble technique, and she didn't smell anything at the moment. After pouring the things, he turned around and left without stopping. The operation was only halfway done, and Greed was still waiting for her help. Inside the shelter cabin, Gretel was extremely busy. He took out bottles of sterile saline and heated them carefully. Seeing Sarala coming back, he immediately greeted. Salara, heat them up and then use freezing rays to cool them. Adjust the temperature to 37 degrees, 37 degrees. Don't be hot, don't be cold. All of these. Yes, I want them all. A whole abdominal cavity. Such a big stomach. Even if there is a cleaning technique to scan it and no saline is used to rinse it back and forth, Greet will still be worried. He knew that this wave of repeated flushing would not be completed without draining 10 bottles of normal saline. Well, fortunately, there is a floating dish, which can be summoned and taken away. It is large enough to hold and easy to move. While Cyrilla was preparing the saline solution, Gretel braced himself and flew out of the hands of 2 mages. The translucent force field palm went deep into the abdominal cavity, held up the stomach and intestines, and carefully explored every place. The old man Yugwan has been standing behind. Looking at him as if facing a formidable enemy, I was quite puzzled. Didn't everything come out? Is there any trouble later? Moreover, judging from Gretel's appearance, it seems that the trouble is still huge. There's so much trouble. Gretel sighed. You see, the stomach bag has expanded to the point where it fills the abdominal cavity, and not all other organs have been crushed. After such a pressure, any part affected may have problems: the stomach, intestines, liver, gallbladder, pancreas. He muttered one word, and Elder Brock's face darkened. These brats in the tribe are really seeking death. Those warriors, especially young warriors, spend their daily lives either in fancy martial arts contests, fighting, or competing for the amount of alcohol they can drink and the amount of food they eat. When you are injured or overfed, you come to him as a matter of course. 800 times out of 1,000, throwing a healing spell will do the trick, and 150 times, throwing a blessing of the bear god will cure the problem. However, there are many times when I can't stand it and seek death. There are always times when a person refuses to get better despite being given the blessing of fortitude, discarding healing spells, and even inducing vomiting. I was tossing and turning on the bed, screaming miserably. If I was lucky, I could get through it. If I was not lucky, I would go see the Black Gate Master. He settled down and watched Gretel's every move. The mage's hands gently hold up the stomach bag, trying to avoid shaking the incision, reducing bleeding, and trying to avoid tearing the mesentery near the gastrointestinal tract. As for tearing blood vessels or something like that, there was no blood spurting out from the beginning to the end. After decompression, the volume of the stomach bag has been greatly reduced, giving the mage's hands enough space to explore. Greet looked through it carefully and suddenly made a sound. There's something wrong here. What? Brock looked over. He stretched his head 3 feet in front of the stage, and with a bang, his face was covered by a mage's hand. Sarala looked serious. You are not allowed to go there without washing your hands. Look at the secret eye. The old man Yugwan smiled bitterly. He took 2 steps to the side. Sarala had already put a secret eye on the shadowless lamp. Now she was working and watching the live broadcast of the surgery, happily. Elder Bullock came to the side and watched with her, listening to Greet's muttering. The shape of the stomach, well, it's completely twisted here. No wonder he can't vomit it out. Tisk tisk, it's a good thing it was discovered. Otherwise, if the twisting took a long time, the entire stomach would be necrotic. Gretel, how do you know to be careful about this? Then, Sarara, remember, when you encounter the triad, that is, when 3 symptoms appear together, you must be careful of gastric torsion. Gretel stopped his hand and let the vines roll up the secret eye into the stomach incision, up, down, left and right. Scan carefully along the stomach wall. While scanning, he explained to the silver dragon girl. First, local distension and pain in the upper abdomen, it only hurts in this area, not everywhere. Second, repetitive retching. Third, the gastric tube is difficult to insert into the stomach, or simply cannot be inserted. If these 3 symptoms appear together, you must be careful of your stomach twisting. This is the triad proposed by Borchardt in 1904 to assist in the diagnosis of gastric volvulus. 100 years later, future generations of doctors are still benefiting from this. Are you telling me this on purpose? Elder Brock quietly pricked up his ears. He watched the 2 light screens change together, and the 2 mage hands carefully moved the stomach bag, both internally and externally. Gretel muttered something while exploring. Well, the greater curvature of the stomach has been twisted to the lesser curvature of the stomach, no wonder the gastric tube can't be inserted. Sarara, pay attention. I'm going to start the reset. The 2 mage hands worked together to twist the stomach bag and quickly return to its normal form. Greet threw out a handful of healing techniques again, repairing the ulcers, inflammation, and perforations on the stomach wall, and observed carefully. Thankfully, after the torsion and reduction, the blood supply to the stomach was quickly restored. There is no ischemic necrosis and the color returns to normal. When the peritoneum was first opened, the ghostly purple-black color finally completely disappeared. Oops, there's a hematoma in the cardia. Tisk, there's also a hematoma in the antrum. Throw the healing spell quickly. Very good, very good. Throw in the treatment and the hematoma will disappear soon. This kind of hematoma is as tender as tofu. It is not easy to sew or prick. If you touch it slightly, blood will burst out for you to see. Elder Brock let out a long breath. Fortunately, the healer took action. If he had done the treatment himself, Bunker's stomach was so twisted that it would have died before the food was fully digested. Celara, prepare the floating saucer. I'm going to rinse it. Blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Sterile saline solution at 37 degrees Celsius is injected into the stomach cavity through the hollow tube at the incision of the stomach wall, rinsed 4 times, and then sucked out with an ASP aerator, a vine plus a negative pressure cyclone. After flushing it back and forth several times, I saw that the color of the normal saline solution was clear and there was no active bleeding. I pulled out the vine and healed the incision on the stomach wall. Then explore other parts of the abdominal cavity. After being pressed by the enlarged stomach pouch for so long, will the blood vessels in other places be blocked? Will there be severe bleeding in the digestive tract? Although the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas have been briefly looked at just now, you still need to look carefully before closing the abdomen. Well, I saw about 200 ml of ascites, turbid color, and gastric contents. I first threw a cleansing technique, then rinsed, suctioned, gave a treatment, and flushed again. Check that there is no active bleeding, check that there are no abnormalities in various organs and mesenteric blood vessels. To be on the safe side, Greet used 1 treatment each on the gallbladder and pancreas, which are most prone to problems after acute gastric dilation. Very good, normal color, normal shape, everything is normal. Well, if it was a previous life, a gastric tube and a jejunal feeding tube should be left here, the opening of the stomach wall should be sutured, an abdominal drainage tube should be left between the stomach and pancreas, and then the abdomen should be closed and transferred to the psychu. But now, intestine, mesentery, scan the treatment. Various mesangial treatments around the stomach to make it grow back. Then close the abdomen layer by layer, treatment, treatment, treatment. Thin white light flashed one after another. When the incision on Bunker's stomach shrank quietly and returned to a smooth state, Cyrilla waved her hand to release the restraint. The next moment, the reckless warrior jumped up. I'm fine? I'm fine. He groped his belly with both hands, from top to bottom, from bottom to top, only to find a smooth and flat patch. The young warrior jumped a few times hard and was sure that he no longer had any pain. He immediately beamed with joy. I'm fine. Ha 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 ha. Dear healer, thank you. He opened his arms and rushed forward to hug Gretel. At the critical moment, Gretel flicked his fingers and cast a string of spells on himself. Shield, Mage Armor, Bull Power, Bear Tenacity. Woo. Crack. A crisp cracking sound. Gretel's cheeks twitched and he almost lost his breath. The bubble technique on his head was squeezed. It stink. Bunker hugged Greet hard, saluted the elder and the beautiful elf lady, and rushed out of the operating room like a whirlwind. Outside the refuge hut, energetic chants soon rang out. Who was it just now? Who said I can't do it? Come forward. Let's compete again. Is this a dog that can't change its eating habits? Gretel's face suddenly darkened. He glared out angrily and turned to look for the old man with feather crown. Hey, your tribe, take care of him. I worked so hard to save him, not just so he could stuff up his stomach again. Your Excellency Nordmark. Facing Gretel's complaining gaze, the old man stepped forward and saluted with a smile. Your treatment methods are really impressive. If you contract with a totem spirit, can your miraculous medical skills be taken a step further? Is this a trick on me? Ready to make an offer? Or, are there any incurable diseases that he can't handle and want to ask for help? Greet's thoughts changed rapidly. He smiled and said, of course. My treatment methods, to a large extent, rely on the perception of the situation inside the patient's body. For example, the hunchback, white fin, the lump on his shoulder. If I contract the virtual body, I can see the situation. If so, maybe it can be treated. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. There are only 3 days until the end of the month for double monthly votes. Please save your monthly votes and start voting for me on the 29th. Thanks to @Assassin for the 1,500 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 443. The barbarian elders all stood up, gathered around the operating table, and stared at the old hunchback lying on the operating table. Beside the operating table, Greed observed the tumor with a serious face, pressing, kneading, and pushing. Almost everyone present had observed the old hunchback's sarcoma and thought about ways to treat it. However, if the treatment is applied, it will either be ineffective or it will grow bigger. If the medicine is applied, the ulcer will break out for you. If you summon the blessings of the bull god, bear god, deer god, and eagle god, what will be the result? Haha. Elder Brock himself had treated him. Be ruthless, cut off a big lump of yellow, fat-like stuff with one knife, and then use healing techniques to heal it. The effect was immediate and the old hunchback was very grateful. All the healers worshipped him. He is indeed a miracle doctor. However, within a year and a half, the thing grew again and became larger than before. The old hunchback's left shoulder is high and his right shoulder is low. It looks like the whole person is being crushed. This time, he no longer dared to ask Elder Brock to cut off the tumor, and Elder Brock himself did not dare to take action. And all the healers in Akula were talking about it? Could it be that he offended the evil god? Or have you offended a demon and been possessed by a demon? Or maybe it was the monster that old hunchback had killed when he was young, and the spirit of the beast came to trouble him? Or, it is said that some kind of necromancer can place rot sacks on living people. The rot sacks will grow bigger and bigger, and eventually they can swallow people. You can't cut that thing. If it's not cut well, it will splash all over you, and the rot sack will be transferred to your body. But as the strongest healer in Akula, Elder Brock always wants to find a chance to give it a try. It's not that he is very close to the old hunchback, it's just that this is related to the face of all spellcasters. If an elder walks around with a tumor for many years, wouldn't it slap everyone in the face and make people think that none of them can cure it? It just so happened that this foreign spellcaster dared to cut people. Just let him try it. If the attempt is successful, it may be possible to end my heartache. Gretel didn't know about these twists and turns, nor did he want to know. All his energy was focused on the big tumor in front of him. Tisk 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 tisk. The size of this tumor is not small. It basically occupies the entire left back, and also covers part of the right back, including the deltoid, infraspinatus, trapezius, teres major, latissimus dorsi. It's all covered. Even the groove in the center of the back has been pushed to the side. With this area, we need to consider whether it has violated the spine. Of course, we can discuss the issue of the spine later. Greet looked at the tumor first. The surface was smooth, soft, and mobile. The skin color and temperature are normal, the boundaries are clear, there is slight tenderness, and the size. When I take a ruler and measure it, it's more than 30 cm * 20 cm. He pressed it and pushed the border with his fingers, feeling satisfied. Although he is only an emergency doctor and not a dermatologist next door, he can intuitively feel that this thing is not very dangerous. The color is normal, the surface is smooth, and there are currently no ulcers, ruling out squamous cell carcinoma, melanoma, etc. The texture is soft and the borders are clear, ruling out fibromas, hemangiomas, and the like. In short, intuition is a very safe and simple thing. Lipoma. According to the medical history, a large lump of yellow, fat-like material had been removed before. The possibility of lipoma was indeed very high. So, now, let me look at the spine. Gretel stood up straight and stretched his waist. Elder Brock had been staring at him closely, and immediately asked, "How is it?" Can it be cured? Wait a minute, I haven't finished reading yet. Before the examination was completed, Greet didn't dare to say whether it could be cured. He waved his hand, first helped the old hunchback up and asked him to stand up. Stand up straight, stand up straight. Keep your back straight. Don't stagger around. Hey, don't lean in any direction intentionally, just stick to your usual standing posture. Sarala understood it and stood on the opposite side with her headdress in hand. Gretel turned on detection magic, raised his eyes, and immediately smiled. This spine is pretty good. No bends. Looking at the way his left shoulder was high and his right shoulder was low, I thought the tumor was too big and had invaded his spine, causing scoliosis. His expression relaxed, and the old man Yuguan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he wanted to speak. Gretel waved his hand to him, took 2 steps to the left, and stood on the left side of the old hunchback. At the same time, Sarala moved to the right and perfectly fulfilled her role as an X-ray source. The lateral view is not very clear, the tumor is a bit deep, and the relationship with the surrounding tissue is not so easy to distinguish. Unfortunately, it would be better to have a CT. How's it going? Is it okay? Elder Yuguan asked in a low voice. Greet shook his head slightly. No, I can't see clearly. He stretched out his finger and made a faint mark on the side of the old man's shoulder and back. You can't see how deep the tumor is. There are some blood vessels nearby. According to the agreement, please lend me a contract spirit and let me take a closer look. There was a sudden buzz in the hall. Not many people in the front row dared to speak, but in the crowd in the back row, people began to whisper. Do you really want to give it to him? An outsider? With a contract spirit, even a slightly qualified child can become an elder. Just give it away like this. It's just for borrowing. It's not for him. The old man in Yuguan's expression remained unchanged and turned a deaf ear. He made a gesture, and immediately 2 young apprentices in white robes came together to move a totem pole. The totem pole was as thick as an arm's length and more than a foot long. When placed in the center of the hall, it almost stood up to the sky. The column body is dark, oily, and smooth, and seems to be covered with a thick layer of patina from top to bottom. Brock turned to the totem pole, groaned, raised his palms high above his head, snap, 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 and clapped 3 times hard. Then, he clasped his hands in front of his chest and began to sing a song that Gretel didn't understand. The song was majestic and desolate, high-pitched and exciting, and the wild air rushed towards her face. Greet's heart was shaken when she heard it. While singing, a sharp eagle cry circled up, reached the highest point, and suddenly swooped down. Gretel's breath hitched. He subconsciously turned on detection magic, and in the halo, a vague shadow of a raptor rushed down and landed on the totem pole. Using both claws hard, a round shadow emerged from the totem pole. I'll lend you this totem spirit for a while. The meditation environment was as turbulent as water waves, and a huge, fiery being came over and established a bridge between him and the shadow. Gretel followed the instructions of the old man Yuguan and relaxed his mind. Soon, he felt that there was a short, round guy in his consciousness. The thing's 2 forelimbs were short and powerful. It was holding something and chewing it with its huge front teeth. Is this a beaver? The contract spirit lent to me is a beaver? Well, that's very beaver. Greet complained silently, driving the virtual spirit to jump up and submerge into the old hunchback's body. The size of the contract spirit is not limited by the physical body. Soon, he saw the situation inside the patient's body through the eyes of the virtual body. Skin, fat, muscles, blood vessels, are too blurry. Get closer and have a clearer view, the envelope outside the tumor. Elder Brock closed his eyes slightly. He used his own spirituality and the spirit of the contract as a bridge to allow Gretel to communicate with the beaver spirit. This is the so-called lend to him. As long as the old man is willing and has a thought, he can sever the connection between the two at any time. There are additional benefits to being a bridge. He could also see what Gretel saw in the spirit, but the speed was too fast, and the old man couldn't keep up. What's this? What is this? A smooth, delicate, and complete skin film. The vision of the beaver spirit is advancing close to the edge of the membrane. Well, the capsule is quite complete, and there is no messy stuff leaking out. It turned around so quickly. Still digging in, what does he want to see? The spiritual vision suddenly lit up, but it was greed who took the initiative to cut off the contact and broke away from the spiritual vision. He stood among the crowd, his face calm and full of confidence. It can be cured. It's just a subcutaneous lipoma. Just cut it off and it'll be fine. Well, for such a simple subcutaneous lipoma, the operation is difficult and can be completed in county-level hospitals. The more troublesome thing is the diagnosis. He has seen lipoma infiltrate the cervical spine before, compress the spinal cord, and cause hemiplegia. Therefore, without CT or MRI, Gretel did not dare to undergo surgery anyway. The alternative is to get a virtual body and take a look. Then, cut it now. The old hunchback asked softly while lying on the operating table. Gretel nodded firmly. If you think you can, cut it now. It's just subcutaneous lipoma. It's a small job in dermatology. People will laugh to death if you publish an article about it. In their hospital, if you want to publish an article about a lipoma, it must at least be a cardiac lipoma, a brainstem lipoma, or a huge subperitoneal lipoma. The skin is prepared, cleaned, local anesthesia is taken, and the scalpel is flying. A long incision was made in the center of the left back, and the mage's hands stretched the skin to both sides. Greed had already investigated it beforehand and knew what was going on. The mage's hands kept sliding along the outside of the capsule, pulling, tearing, and blunt separation. The lipoma is cut open without damaging the surrounding muscles and blood vessels. The movements are light and quick, and there is no hesitation from start to finish. Soon, a huge lipoma, together with the capsule, was lifted out by the mage's hand. The tumor was so big that the mage's hands were 3 to 5 sizes larger than normal palms. Who's going to weigh it? How heavy is this tumor? Gretel shouted as he rinsed. Their general surgery department has removed tumors up to 3 kilograms, and it is said that the dermatology department has removed tumors weighing more than 5 kilograms. Tisk, if this can break a record, even though I am embarrassed to post an article, I can still brag with them. A group of savages looked at each other. What, you just cut it, but you still have to weigh it. Is this a quirk of outside healers? Is this healer really a servant of the god of nature, not a necromancer? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for all kinds of. Thinking about it, which one should I choose among Gretel's contract spirits? Do you have any good suggestions? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 444. Gretel's healing skills impressed the barbarian elders. On the third day, he wrapped himself in a large cloak and held up cold and heat-resistant, sat on Bernard's mount, and joined the barbarians' team of hunting monsters. Yes, after discussions between the elders, the leader, Gotti, and the speaker, the above four overlap to a certain extent. The old man Yuguan, the elder Brock of the host L'Aquila tribe, officially informed Greed. He can contract one of those unknown totem spirits for auxiliary treatment. Of course, this is not without conditions. The old man in Yuguan leaned on a pale white bone staff. A pair of raptor hooks on the head of the staff were shiny black. He shook it slightly and made a clattering sound. For a long time, The outsiders who took away the totem spirits from us have left behind rich and sufficient gifts. Young healer, what can you give? Gretel, what do you need? Gold coins. Weapons. Magic equipment. Gold. It does seem that there are still several hundred coins in the space bag, but judging from the elder's intention, I'm afraid it may not be enough. Arms. The oak staff is connected to the spirit and can never be separated from you. The surgical instruments are your treasure, and anything else cannot be considered a weapon. Magic equipment. There are a few pieces of magic equipment, such as Lin An's trophies, which were given to him a bunch before. However, I don't know if they are enough to exchange for a totem spirit. Can you just make an offer directly? You know, a totem spirit means a tribe's hundreds of years of worship and sacrifice. The old man continued with a smile, and the feather cloak on his body rustled, like an eagle spreading its wings, flying across sky. Greed had reason to suspect that this was also a set of equipment attached to a spirit body. A totem spirit means that a young man with some qualifications can inherit its power and become a spellcaster, protecting the tribe for decades. Young healer, what can you give? I can neither offer sacrifices for hundreds of years, nor can I protect a tribe for decades. Gretel was silent for a moment, raised his head, and looked directly at the old man. During tribal gatherings, I will do my best to treat the sick and injured. If anyone asks me for medical advice, I will teach him candidly and according to his ability and understanding. That's enough. The old man smiled, stretched out his palm, and high-fived him to sign the contract. Of course, we are also willing to pay a little sincerity first. Don't you want to find a mount for your followers? There are some magical beasts in the tribe. You can go and have a look with your followers and choose the one you like. Oh. Gretel's eyes sparkled. Mount. Bernard is finally going to have a mount. Finally, I no longer have to spread my legs and follow him. Winter wolf. Frost wolf. Kodo. Giant rhinoceros. Bernard, you wouldn't pick a wild boar, would you? Wild boars are so shy. The roar of the animal pen shook the sky. Greed was walking forward excitedly before, but as he walked, he fell behind Bernard, throwing defensive spells at himself one after another. Mage armor, hang it up. Shield spell, hang it up. Remote protection, hang it up. Resist energy damage, hang it up. Seeing him like this, Sarala shook her head and snorted far away towards the animal pen. In an instant, everything was silent. The howling of wolves, the neighing of horses, and all kinds of grunts were all silenced. The night wind blew, and Greet even vaguely smelled a pungent stench. Gretel threw another bubble spell and hurried forward. When he looked around, Bernard had already passed a black wolf, and then passed a huge silver wolf with a shoulder height of 1.5 meters. At this moment, he stopped in front of a fat and strong wild boar that seemed to weigh more than a ton. He thought about it, shook his head, and continued walking forward. Greet, Bernard, wait a minute. Why don't you pick that silver wolf? Silver wolf is so handsome. Can fight again. Don't be afraid that you can't afford it. Your boss and I are rich now. I can still feed him a pig a day. Bernard paused, looked back at Greet, and hesitated to speak. He hesitated and sighed. Boss, you can't beat it? Well, it doesn't matter if I can't beat it, as long as you can beat it. Besides, isn't there Sarala? Which monster dares to make a mistake in front of Sarala? Greet looked at Bernard expectantly, then stood on tiptoe and looked back. Silver wolf, judging from its coat color and body shape, it should be a frost wolf. It would be great as a mount. He's fierce and handsome, and his hair is so long that it's so easy to stroke. Boss. Bernard looked at him helplessly. This thing is too vicious. If it is tied to the door of your hospital, the hospital will not have to worry about any patients. Well. The silver dragon girl chuckled. Gretel was dejected and followed silently. The wild boar, don't drop it, the giant horse, don't drop it, a fat bird that looks weird and looks like it can't fly at all, don't drop it. Finally, Bernard silently stopped in front of a pure white stag. Bernard, you want to ride this? Gretel tried to stand on tiptoes to see. Well, that's good. The deer's shoulder height was over Bernard's shoulders, which is to say, more than 2 meters. I don't know if it can kneel down. If not, Gretel has only 2 options if he wants to ride it. 1. Climb up with a ladder, 2. Fly. Bernard can certainly jump on it, though. Moreover, looking at the huge stature of the giant deer, it is estimated that humping Bernard will not be a problem, and humping another one will not be a problem either. The stag's huge antlers spread out from side to side. Greet stretched his arms outwards and took a tentative measurement. It seems, maybe, as if his own arm span is less than half of someone else's antlers. He secretly sighed. Bernard had already chatted with the guide for a few words, opened the animal pen and walked in. As you walk, open your arms with your palms forward in a peaceful and friendly gesture. The white deer stood there quietly, like a ball of moonlight. When Bernard came closer, he reached out to touch it, his nose twitched twice, and he suddenly bumped into it. Gretel, hey. Bernard was already prepared. He took half a step to the side, stretched out his hands, and each held a branch of an antler. Bow slightly, exhale and say, hey. The muscles of the barbarian's arms are bulging, and he is dedicated to taming the stag with strength. Gretel stood watching from a distance, hesitating whether to use the strength of a bull. Will it be counterproductive? In the process of taming a mount, if someone else helps, will the mount choose to die rather than surrender? Don't help him. Sirui pulled him and lowered his voice. The silver moon deer is very proud, and its magic perception is very sensitive. If you throw a buff spell, it will definitely be able to sense it. Okay, Gretel lowered his arms and stood tall outside the animal pen, holding a ball of healing magic in his hand. If you don't cheat, you won't cheat. If either party is really hurt, let him intervene. Bernard and the white deer were in a stalemate for a while, then he suddenly shouted and twisted the deer's antlers to the side. Bailu fell sideways, raised his leg and kicked, and Bernard quickly jumped away. When he was about to move forward, the white deer sprayed out a bright ball of light, which almost hit Bernard. One person and one deer rolled over and over, entangled from morning to dusk, and finally the dust settled. Bernard, with a grey face, put his arm around the white deer's neck and led it out of the stable and came to greet. The barbarian grinned and laughed boldly. Boss, it's done. Yeah, not bad. Gretel threw him 2 healing techniques to treat the bruises on his arms and legs, and looked up at the white deer. Observing from a close distance, Gretel felt more and more tall that it was tall. Greet stood on tiptoes and stretched out his arms, but he couldn't even touch its head. Bailu was also looking at him curiously. Her almond-shaped eyes were gentle and peaceful, without the slightest ferocity when she was wrestling with Bernard. Her nostrils were flaring, and she lowered her head to sniff the palm of his hand, then licked it wetly. From her posture to her eyes, she is worthy of the reputation of forest elf. The only thing that ruined the image was the silver satin-like fur, which was now black, flowery, and rolled into clumps with the soil. It was simply too horrible to look at. Hey, you need a bath. Gretel stood up on tiptoes and patted its forehead. Bailu snorted, condensed a ball of moonlight, and pressed it on his bruised right front leg. Then he lowered his head further, and the next moment, the world rotated. The white deer grabbed his collar, raised its neck, and jerked him backwards. With a snap, Greet threw himself to the ground and lay on the deer's back. He was wrong. Besides building a ladder and flying up using flying skills, there are other ways to ride. Ah! Where are you going? Let me go. I don't want to swim. You made it dirty, but I didn't make it dirty. I don't want to catch a cold in such cold water. Help. In short, Bernard's new mount accepted Gretel in a very unexpected way. The barbarians didn't need to use violence to control them, or even weren't present at all. Gretel could safely sit on the deer's back and wander around. Of course, with the size of this deer, it is enough to accommodate Greet and Bernard, as well as Cyrilla, Lynn, and Aurora, sitting on it together. Oh, Mr. Trochka can lie on the antlers, and Lynn's golden skull can be strung on the antlers. Gretel looked at the antlers in front of him with great satisfaction. It's wide and flat. He measured it before and found that the width is nearly 4 meters. When marching in the team, it can cause clearing effect without any effort. Of course, the wilderness is vast and sparsely populated, so he can walk sideways as he pleases. When I return to Nevis in the future, I am afraid I will have to take a detour from the countryside every day. Greet thought wildly and touched the smooth fur on the deer's neck. There are about a dozen branches scattered on the antlers. They are not sharp, and the curvature of the top can be said to be gentle. Natural for stand. A silver moon deer like this is standing in the hospital lobby, and there can be a dozen recliners underneath it to accommodate a dozen patients for infusion. It just so happens that this kind of monster itself also has certain healing capabilities, and can be used by half a priest. Perfect. Greet took out a handful of seeds, spawned vines, and brought green leaves to the silver moon deer's mouth. The white deer turned its head slightly, rolled its long tongue, chewed the leaves and vines, and swallowed them all. Then, he scratched his hooves and snorted with satisfaction. Bernard, how much longer do we have to go? Hurry up, boss. The Black Crow jungle is ahead. Passing through the Black Crow jungle, that's where we'll be hunting this time. 3,000 words. Another update completed. Asking for the silver moon deer's name, don't call her Ilun. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Asking for double monthly tickets starting on the 29th. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 445. Wangshan is a dead horse. Fortunately, the deer can't be killed by running away. It took more than half a day to get from Greet's place, to the Black Crow jungle, and then through the Black Crow jungle into the hunting area. Fortunately, the silver moon deer has a broad back, so Greet can sit on it however he wants, moving left, right, forward, and back and forth. When you get tired of sitting, adjust your posture, and then continue reading on the deer's back. Big hunting during Akula's time required more than 1,000 or 2,000 men. In addition to the necessary personnel who stayed in the camp, all soldiers and spellcasters were mobilized. Throughout the winter, fresh animal meat, furs exchanged, animal sinews and bones used to make tools and medicinal materials. Just look at this wave. The soldiers scattered in all directions. With a radius of thousands of miles, the tribes that came to participate in Akula were large and small, numbering nearly 100, and the number of warriors gathered was more than 2,000 or 3,000. They took the tribe as a unit and formed a large circle from a distance according to the areas that had been divided in advance. Work together to drive the beast toward the center. Gretel sat on the back of the silver moon deer. After concentrating for a moment, he heard whimpering in the distance, one after another. The voice sounds a bit familiar. Well, I seem to have heard it somewhere. They were blowing bark whistles to attract deer behind him. Bernard pointed into the distance and explained. There is a kind of tree in the Black Crow jungle. You can peel off the bark and roll it into a whistle, and you can blow out the sound of a doe. A hunter who is good at playing the whistle can use the whistle to attract the buck, and other beasts will follow. Of course, if there is the powerful monster requires high-level warriors to take action. He pointed nearby. Gretel followed his directions and saw a group of barbarian warriors surrounding the elders not far away. All of them are tall and burly, with upright figures. Just standing there, a powerful aura rushes towards them. Looking at their weapons, a small number of them carried bone rods and bone hammers, while the majority held steel axes and steel rods. The cold light shines brightly on each piece. Judging from the color of the steel and the patterns reflecting sunlight on the blade surface, it is obvious that they were made by dwarves. Considering the barrenness of the great wilderness, being able to use weapons made by dwarves, it is obvious that these people are all outstanding warriors. How long will it take for the war to begin? Greet sat up straight, stretched his neck and looked into the distance. Well, the big hunt is very interesting, but the lure roundup before the hunt is not good at all. There is no movement at all. From his position, he could only hear the deer whistle and see the trees shaking in the distance. Occasionally, someone would use a long stick to lift a big messy piece of cloth and shake it hard twice, not knowing what it meant. Do you want to give yourself the eagle eye technique? Or should we wait until the big hunt begins? Just boring. Greet patted the back of the deer beneath him. Appa, let's go get some water. The silver moon deer snorted, took him and Bernard and walked towards the creek not far away. Bernard originally named this new Mount Aparo after borrowing the name of the ancient mythical beast. Gretel thought it was too long, so he cut off a section and called it Aparo. The silver moon deer didn't care. When Greet shouted, it came over wagging its tail, knelt down on all four legs and let Greet climb up. Bernard couldn't do anything against his boss, but Sarah was laughing uncontrollably. Apa is a good name. When you ride it alone, if no one is there to control it, it can easily turn into, bang. Cirella. No matter how much he was ridiculed, Appa himself accepted the new name. Greet gave the order, and it swayed to the edge of the stream and lowered its head to drink water. Bernard jumped down first, and Gretel cast a feather falling technique on himself, floating to the ground. Fetching water, setting up a stove, boiling, and throwing freezing rays are all done in one go. After filling his skin, Gretel poured himself a glass and drank slowly with his eyes narrowed. Halfway through the drink, there was a sudden loud sound in the trees on the other side, and a group of blood-stained soldiers rushed out of the dense forest. Black-clouded leopard! It's black-clouded leopard! Shouted the warrior at the front. Beside Gretel, the wind was blowing, and high-level soldiers had already rushed forward to meet them, attacking and rescuing others. The next moment, in the dense forest, there were roars, and shouts, branches were broken, and trunks collapsed. Greet poured the water in the cup onto the ground and turned towards the wounded. Within a few steps, Appa rushed over with rapid hooves. Bernard picked him up and flew onto the deer, with the wind whistling in his ears. When he stopped again, he was already standing on the edge of the elders. In front of them, there were soldiers who had just come out of the dense forest. There were 5 of them in total, all of them injured. The skin of the lightest one was rolled up, with a row of 4 claw marks on its body, almost reaching the bone. The other leg had a piece of deer skin stuck in it, and the blood was dripping, staining the entire thigh. The other arm, chest, and back were covered with blood. The heaviest one had half of his arm bitten off. He lay on top of the soldier who came out first and was already unconscious. The healers were busy collectively. If his elders are present, he will treat his own warriors. If his elders are not present, the elder Brock of the host tribe will take care of it with his 2 apprentices. Those who clean the wounds, those who chant, those who apply medicine. The effects of the treatment are immediate. Soon, the rolled flesh of the one with the least injury had returned to its original shape, the claw marks disappeared, and the skin healed. The thigh of the one with the injured leg was smooth, the wound of the one with blood all over his body had at least stopped bleeding. The soldiers were lying on the ground with pale faces, their faces full of weakness, and their eyes were already glowing. Their task of luring out a high-level monster has been completed. If they go back this time, they will definitely get the best loot. Only the soldier with a broken arm looked desperate. The elders of his tribe had treated him, and the bleeding was stopped at the fracture, and he was even covered with a new layer of skin, so his life was safe. However, the severed limb hangs empty by his side. He can no longer make a fist, can no longer wield the tomahawk, and can no longer fight with it. He is useless. He is useless. Elder! He shouted tremblingly. In front of him, the middle-aged spellcaster wearing deerskin and antlers shook his head bitterly. I can't, Sev, I can't reattach the severed limb. The deer antler priest turned to look at the center of the elder group. In the entire Akula, he had only heard of Elder Brock performing the spell to restore severed limbs once. However, even Elder Brock would have to pay a huge price for using such a high-level spell once. Sci-fi is only an intermediate warrior, and the hunt has just begun. Elder Brock cannot possibly treat him. You can't, you can't. Sci-fi raised his head blankly, his face pale. He looked at the busy casters one by one from left to right, but no one responded to his expectations. No one can save him. No one can cure him. Without an arm, he could only fight with his left arm, greatly reducing his value to the tribe. Of course, the tribe would not abandon him and drive him into the wilderness, but apart from survival, he would not be able to obtain more resources. There will no longer be enough high-quality food to maintain his physical strength and combat effectiveness. His strength will soon decline, and in a year or two at most, he can only do low-end jobs like watching cattle, herding sheep, and patrolling with low-level warriors. His wife will no longer be able to partake of the rich, soft animal skins and the beautiful shells tangled in her temples. His son will be able to join the hunting team next year and will no longer get the steel knife he has been waiting for so long. His little daughter, he once promised to bring her a colorful headband when she came back from Akula. The young man with a broken arm began to cry. All around, the comrades who came back with him and the high-level soldiers who were guarding the elders all looked at him with regret, but no one came forward to persuade him. What can you advise? What can you do to help him? Life in the wilderness is so difficult, no tribe can afford to feed an extra mouth. Sci-fi fell to the ground and cried bitterly. Crying, he grabbed the severed arm wrapped in his arms and smashed it on the ground. Bring it back for what? What for? In order to snatch the severed arm from the black clouded leopard's mouth, the captain was caught bleeding and his body was covered with wounds. The bloody broken arm fell down and was about to reach the ground, but suddenly stopped. Then, it hung in the air, floating up, up, up. Sci-fi's hair stood on end. Even though he knew that there was a spellcaster, the strange sight in front of him still made him tremble. Immediately, a young human walked over quickly and looked at the severed arm. After a moment, he raised his hand to himself and asked softly, "How long have you been injured?" It's amazing that I can actually understand what he said. Sci-fi had no intention of being surprised by this, and answered tremblingly. A meal or so. Fighting, fleeing, severe pain, he was really not sure how much time had passed, it seemed like a year, or it seemed like only a blink of an eye. Will he be dissatisfied with this answer? Do you feel that the time is too long and your arms can't pick it up? Sure enough, the human spellcaster opposite seemed to frown in dissatisfaction. Sci-fi held his breath nervously. Even though he came from a distant border, he knew that a human healer came to Akula this time. Bunker's stomach was broken due to a gambling fight, and it was the human who cured it. It is said that many elders could not do this. Can he reattach his arm? Is he willing to treat himself? Can I still reattach my arm? Maybe, maybe not. Greet checked the severed limb in his hand and was surprised to find that the limb still retained a lot of activity. He squatted down, looked straight at the armless warrior opposite, and answered seriously. Let me explain first that the wound on your broken arm has healed and your life has been saved. I can try to reconnect your broken arm, but if the effect is not good, it may affect your life safety. Even so, you want me to try it? I do. Of course I do. Sci-fi was so surprised that he was almost incoherent. He used his good arm to support the ground, got up from his knees, and grabbed Greet's clothes. Sir. Please pick it up for me. Please. Apero is another name for Malorn. Well. Please subscribe, please recommend tickets, and ask for guaranteed monthly tickets starting on the 29th, meow. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 446. Elder Brock has been paying attention to Gretel. Hearing Greet say, "You can try to reattach the broken arm," he frowned and walked over quickly. Before asking, the elf girl next to Gretel had already spoken clearly. "Gretel, can you really do it? Regeneration is a 7th level magic. I can't even do it. Can you really do it?" "Yes, that is a 7th level magic." Elder Brock has heard this statement. Outside the Great Wilderness, those humans classified spells into levels 1 to 9. Next down is the apprentice spell, and above that is the legendary level above the 9th level. 7th level magic means that only a priest of at least level 13, or a magician of the same level who specializes in medical treatment, can cast it. And what about Greed? The division of power in the Great Wasteland is not that fine. Their own assessment is only accurate to low level, mid-level and high level. According to Elder Brock's perception, Gretel is about the middle level, the kind who has just entered the middle level and has just stabilized. Elder Brock himself is already at an average level among high-level spellcasters. But even if he himself casts a limb regeneration, he would have to use up all his mental and magical power. Greet, is that okay? Elder Brock held the bone staff and couldn't help but take a step forward, and then another step forward. Is this young human healer bragging so freely in order to obtain the totem spirit? Or is it because he sincerely cares about the soldier's situation that he would rather overdraw his own strength? Either way, it's not a good sign. Elder Brock's thick long eyebrows trembled slightly as he stared at Gretel, hesitating whether to speak. However, at the end of his sight, Greed had already laughed softly. "Ah, I can really pick it up," he smiled confidently, looking into the eyes of the silver dragon girl without evading. "Sarala, you believe me? This operation is not too difficult and is within my capabilities. Of course, I still need a little help from you. Amputated limb replantation surgery is a 3rd level surgery in terms of clinical classification. In other words, senior attending physicians can preside over it, while junior attending physicians can conduct it under the guidance of superior physicians. And he himself, before time travel, was already the deputy chief physician. Of course, there is a big difference between microsurgery replantation of amputated limbs and emergency department surgery. In reality, you need to obtain special surgical qualifications, and you can't just do it if you want to. However, the success or failure of replantation surgery depends largely on the healing process. If the blood vessels do not leak and the blood supply can be restored, the operation will be half successful. But with the protection of healing skills, this difficulty almost does not exist. He didn't even have to sew up the blood vessels. "Then do it quickly," Sarala urged immediately. Gretel smiled and waved his hand. "Wait a minute, let me get ready. Well, let me ask you one last time, has this arm really only had time for one meal since it was broken?" He did not look at the broken-armed soldier, but at the comrades who had just been treated as they came back to protect him. The 4 warriors nodded incessantly, especially the one who carried him back, repeatedly promising, "Definitely less than a meal. After a long time, we won't be able to escape from the mouth of the black clouded leopard." "Well, that'll do." Gretel summoned a floating dish, and put the surgical instruments on it, scalpel, hemostat, normal saline, and irrigation equipment. A silver rod sandwiched with thin glass wires used to guide healing techniques. Finally, there is a palm-sized magnifying glass. Cleansing and saline are used back and forth, and rinsed repeatedly. Cyrilla, do me a favor later. Fix this magnifying glass and don't let it float around. I will rely on it to connect the limbs. There is no need to dismantle the microscope, just use the magnifying glass. Although replantation of severed limbs is considered a microsurgical direction, it is not as delicate as replantation of severed fingers. The required magnification is 2.5 to 6 times. In 1963, Professor Chen from the Chinese Academy of Sciences successfully performed the first replantation of a severed limb in the history of world medicine. He completed the operation without using a microscope at all, relying solely on his naked eyes and experience. A magnifying glass is enough. This thing, Cyrilla looked closer and wrinkled her nose. Then, she formed a circle with the index finger and thumb of her right hand and stretched it under Gretel's nose. Is this okay? The scene beneath my finger shrank and zoomed in and out, zoomed in and out. Greet concentrated his mind and carefully examined the magnification. It's okay, that's okay. But Sarah, you know, the germ-free operation, the silver dragon girl wrinkled her nose and jumped back. Without waiting for Greet to ask, she muttered a few words in a low voice and waved her hand casually. Immediately, a translucent bubble appeared in front of Gretel's eyes. Following the gestures of the silver dragon girl, it rises and falls, and moves continuously. Can I do it now? That's it? The old rules are to open a refuge hut and hang up a shadowless lamp. I'm going to wash my hands. In an instant, the surrounding healers looked at each other and started gearing up. The refuge hut can only accommodate 10 people. In addition to Gretel, Sarah, the patients undergoing treatment, and the host Elder Brock, grab the other spectator positions. Ping pong ping pong ping pong. Gretel was not disturbed at all. Cleansing, hand washing with soap, and water making also summon running water. He completed the preoperative preparations with ease, used a floating saucer as a stool to sit on, geared up, and started. Debridement. Nonsense, debridement of course. In any surgical operation, the first step must be thorough debridement. Go, 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 go. First, wash the severed limb with soapy water and a brush. Don't think about sterility, just start cleaning. Then, rinse again with plenty of sterile saline. Then, change the gloves, perform a set of cleaning techniques on the hands, and use another set of brushes and soapy water to scrub the wound edges. Next, 3% iodine tincture, 75% ethanol. Think too much, St. saline, take action. After the flushing was completed, the draping was done as usual, and next came the scalpel and hemostatic forceps, with cold light flying up and down. Sci-fi sat on the side obediently, watching Gretel immerse himself in dealing with his broken arm, and couldn't help but tremble. Even though his arm had been bitten off by the black clouded leopard and was not connected to his body, he would tremble subconsciously every time the knife flashed and cut off a small piece of muscle or a small section of blood vessel. It's so terrible. Why are the methods of human healers so terrible? When the elder was treating him, a red light flashed and he pressed on the broken part of his arm, and then he was cured. Sir, I can reconnect this arm, I won't die. Probably not. Your arm is a little longer. Fortunately, it was broken for a short time, so it probably won't kill anyone, Greet replied without raising his head. He turned his eyes and glanced at the half-broken arm held by the mage's hand. Palm, wrist, forearm, half of upper arm. Is it difficult to reach the arms if they are long? Elder Yuguan took a step forward and couldn't help but ask. The broken arm is longer and less likely to die. Shouldn't it be easier to reattach? Elder, broken limbs are poisonous. Gretel sighed. To be precise, this kind of high-level amputated limb is rich in muscle. After 6 to 8 hours of ischemia at normal temperature, the muscle cells will degenerate and necrosis, releasing toxic substances such as potassium ions, myoglobin, and peptides. They accumulate in the tissue fluid and blood of the amputated limb. Forget it if you don't reattach it. After the severed limb is replanted, it will definitely flow along the blood vessels and throughout the body. So, if you put poisonous limbs back into a person's body, the person will die. So, what kind of limbs are non-poisonous? Elder Brock spoke in a low voice, as if talking to himself. He always remembered that tragic failure, when he released the regeneration technique for the first time to join the limbs of the tribe's high-level warriors. When you cast a spell, there is always a powerful force extracting your own mana. It was as if the warrior's body was saying, "Not enough, not enough. This amount of treatment is not enough to restore me." In the end it was not enough. The leg was reattached, but 1 day later, the soldier fell into a coma and struggled for another 2 days and 2 nights. In the end, he could not be saved. That failure was unforgettable. The teacher who taught him the regeneration technique also once said, "With this technique, it is better to make the limbs grow back than to reconnect the severed ones. If the regeneration is uneven, you can try it again. If the regeneration is not done well, the person will die. Elder Brock observed Gretel as covertly as possible, pretending not to care. Such precious knowledge, could this young human healer speak? What would he demand in exchange for, say, a totem spirit? In fact, it is not impossible to use the secret of connecting limbs to replace it with a totem spirit. But as a tribe elder, he always hopes to change a little more. Unexpectedly, Gretel made no conditions at all. He stared at the broken limbs, looking at the pale bone stubble, the shocking fractures, blood vessels, muscles, ligaments, flying on his hands, and said something like a casual chat. "It doesn't matter if the time is short, but if it is long, it will be very troublesome. Generally speaking, such a long arm or leg cannot be reattached 6 to 8 hours after it is broken. Toxic substances entering the body can cause systemic reactions and even death, which is what is clinically called reperfusion injury. Therefore, the replantation time of high-level amputated limbs is strictly controlled within 6 to 8 hours. Fortunately, not long has passed since the injury. If reperfusion injury occurs, a barbarian's physique should still be able to withstand it. Alas, there is no way to test liver function and kidney function, and there is no way to administer medicine in a targeted and timely manner. If something is really wrong, we can only rely on treatment to cure it. Greet complained silently, speeding up. Behind him, Elder Brock was silently concentrating, memorizing every word and action of Gretel. Perhaps, there is a trick here that can increase the success rate of regeneration by 10%. Later, a few elders who were lucky enough to squeeze in, although they were not qualified to release the regeneration technique at all, they were still trying to remember, and they wanted to get a notebook and copy down every detail. Replace a severed limb. It's a rare sight. If this human healer succeeds, just the treatment method and these few words can be exchanged for a treasure from healers from other tribes. Huh. What is this servant of the god of nature doing? Why did he take a weird-looking tube, suck in some salt water, and start piercing the broken arm? 3,000 words. Another update completed. Please subscribe, ask for double monthly tickets starting tomorrow, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 447. Gretel's hand was steady. His heart is also very quiet. Fill the 20 ml syringe with normal saline and insert it steadily into the vascular cavity of the stump brachial artery. Hold the syringe with the index and middle fingers of your right hand, hold the piston head with your thumb, and push the injection forward slowly. In the previous life, the injection needle used for blood vessel flushing should have a flat head to avoid damaging the lining of the blood vessel. However, Gretel did not expect this when he was making needles. All needles are beveled. Let the gold coins be made and disinfected now, it's too late. When transplanting a severed limb, you need to race against time to minimize the damage. He could only use his own steady operation to keep the needle parallel to the longitudinal axis of the blood vessel to avoid inserting the sharp needle into the inner wall of the blood vessel. Then, inject the liquid slowly and steadily, allowing the saline to enter the artery along the lumen of the blood vessel, and gurgling forward along the passage of the blood vessel. Not fast, not slow. If it is too fast, the water column hits the lining of the blood vessel cavity, which will damage the extremely delicate intima. If it is too slow, the physiological saline cannot reach the end of the limb and then flow back along the vein. The limbs have been severed, there is no heartbeat, no arterial contraction, and only the pressure given by the syringe can push the saline forward in the blood vessels. It is necessary to reach the end in order to flush out the accumulated metabolic products and clots in the tissues, and to expand the spasm and closed small blood vessels and capillary network. In his previous life, he had never undergone replantation of severed limbs or organ transplants. What is the appropriate injection speed? He can only test it bit by bit based on his own estimation. Well, first of all, there is no pressure when injecting, which means there is no clot nearby, which is okay. Inject one tube of normal saline, suck another tube, and continue injecting. Gretel muttered while rinsing. Oh, it would be nice if there was a pump. Flushing with a syringe can never ensure uniform and stable pressure. Heparin saline should be used here. Heparin, the silver dragon girl suddenly interrupted. Just like Greet, she pulled a floating saucer as a stool and leaned to the side to watch. Hearing Greet's muttering, he immediately asked, "What is heparin? Is it squeezed out of liver?" "Did you hear that?" A few steps behind the operating table, Elder Brock's voice was loud and his feather crest was vibrating. "Master Healer needs a liver. Someone go and get a piece of liver. I need a fresh one." Under his heavy gaze, someone immediately turned around and ran out. Gretel Khan. Don't. Although heparin was, discovered from the liver, it doesn't mean that you can extract heparin by taking a piece of liver and squeezing the juice. Whether it is unfractionated heparin or low molecular weight heparin, the production process is quite complicated and precise. If you give me a piece of liver, I won't use it. Besides, current heparin is mainly extracted from cow lungs or pig small intestinal mucosa, and it has nothing to do with liver. The elder who ran out suddenly braked. Sarala sat at the far end of the operating table, stared at the wounds of the severed limbs through her secret eyes, and asked in a low voice, "What should we do? What can I do? If I don't have it, I won't have it." Gretel answered dully through the mask. After all, saline flushing uses physical methods to remove blood clots, while the use of heparin prevents blood from coagulating again. Well, as long as he connects the blood vessels quickly enough and throws in enough treatment techniques, he won't be afraid of blood clots. Greet, what are these red, blue, and yellow things? Ah, these are the blood vessels and nerves I marked. The red ones are arteries, the blue ones are veins, and the yellow ones are nerves. So later on, it's red after red, blue after blue, and yellow after yellow, right? That's right. That's roughly it. Gretel stared at the wounds of the severed limbs and explained to her in a low voice. The mage's trick is so convenient. If it was in the previous life, silk thread would be tied on it to mark it when cleaning. Not to mention the difficulty of operation, blood vessels and nerves are so fragile. There will definitely be physical damage if they are pricked. Behind the refuge hut, the elders gathered to listen to the lecture heaved a sigh of relief and almost knelt down in gratitude. "Miss Elf, you are so considerate. The healer answered your question casually, which saved us so much research time. Well, after I finish repairing the broken arm, I must give her a gift." "Give lots of gifts," Greet replied in a low voice, operating carefully and trying to maintain the stability of his movements. Seeing the red-stained flushing liquid flowing out, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Well, the flushing fluid is starting to flow out of the medullary cavity, which is good. There is flushing fluid flowing out of the cephalic vein, basilic vein, and brachial vein, indicating that the physiological saline has reached the end of the limb and returned along the capillary network. These three small points have been marked before and should be the radial accessory artery, middle accessory artery and superior ulnar accessory artery. The flushing fluid also flows out." "Great." Of course, there were indeed bruises and swelling in some places. After all, it had been caught in a leopard's mouth. Gretel would clean up whatever he could. If he couldn't, he could only let him go for the time being. After flushing the blood vessels, he assessed the situation and turned to Sci-fi, who was watching tremblingly with a broken arm hanging. "Lie down, I'm going to start picking up." Sci-fi's face turned pale. Although I was mentally prepared, it still felt quite scary to actually lie down and be knifed. In particular, what he was given to lie on was not a table, but 3 discs connected together. They were slippery, translucent, and could move when pressed. Situations are stronger than people. The elders of his tribe winked, and a group of spellcasters were watching him eagerly, so he had no choice but to climb up and lie down. A confinement spell fell, and he was immediately speechless, unable to move, and froze there. "Well, it's not necessary." Gretel really wanted to say this, but when the words came to her mouth, she swallowed them back. Replantation of amputated limbs in the arm, in theory, only requires anesthesia of the brachial plexus. However, considering the patient's acceptance of the operation, in order to avoid halfway through the operation, the patient jumped off the operating table and ran away. It is better to use general anesthesia. No worries. Anyway, magical anesthesia is not drug anesthesia. There is no problem of anesthetic metabolism, liver and kidney burden, etc. It is just numb. He threw the silver skull and manipulated it to cut through Sci-fi's skin, stretch the muscles, and clamp the proximal blood vessels. Then, he raised his broken arm and compared the trimmed broken bones forward. Alas, it was broken in the upper arm, which is relatively easy to reattach. There is only one humerus. If the forearm is broken, then the 2 bones are the radius and ulna. A colleague working in the orthopedics department once cried and complained that the 2 bones were reset together. The radius was healed, but the ulna was crooked. The ulna was healed, but the radius was misplaced again. How can one cry when one hears it, and sad when one sees it? Gretel had his own hands, the silver skeleton's hands, and 5 or 6 mage hands, flying up and down, busy non-stop. Clamp blood vessels, reshape broken bones, click with wrong ears. During the previous debridement, Greed had already repaired the broken bone. Now, after incising the proximal skin and seeing the broken bones with his own eyes, he trimmed them extra carefully, smoothing them as smooth as possible so that they could fit together. "Is it okay? Can I throw healing spells?" Sarala poked her head around, eager to give it a try. A ball of white light has condensed between your fingers, ready to be pressed anytime and anywhere. Well, Gretel is just a 5th-level priest with only a little bit of mental power. His mental power should be saved for more important things. "I'll do the treatment or whatever." "SHH." Greet whispered to her to be quiet. "Ah, I feel so unaccustomed to not making the cross-section into a trapezoid, interlocking with each other, and not fixing it with Kirchner wires or screws." but if it is shaped into a trapezoid, the bones and the entire arm will be significantly shorter. And here, the bone healing does not take too long, so there is no need to use trapezoidal bite, internal and external fixation to increase strength. He calculated and operated. The heavy rongeur was as light as nothing in the hands of the silver skeleton. Click, click, click. After checking for a perfect fit, the previously stripped periosteum was recovered on the bone stubble. Be careful. Be more careful. It is best not to injure the soft and delicate periosteum. Broken bones can easily grow back if they are covered by periosteum. Although the healing technique is powerful, if you can save a little, just save a little. Okay. Cyrilla. Coming. A group of white light condensed-like substance descended. Gretel stared closely at the cross-section of the humerus, watching the periosteum tightly wrapping the broken bone, and watching the gaps in the bones gradually close. Lying down a little further, I took a photo with Cyrilla's headgear and looked at the bone seam at the far end that was bitten by the black clouded leopard. It was filled with the healing spell, and there were no more cracks. Sharp. Excellent therapeutic skills. Miss Silver Dragon competes high. This healing technique is already stronger than the treatment of moderate injuries, it is enough to treat serious injuries. It completely fell on one bone. No wonder the bone immediately fit together, exactly the same as before it was injured. Greet beamed with joy, raised his thumb to Cyrilla, and continued working. Well, now that the bones are fixed, next comes the blood vessels. If the blood vessels can be successfully anastomotic, the arm will be alive, and the only question left is how much function can be restored. Gretel put away the silver skull, closed his eyes, and concentrated his mind. Then, the thumb and index finger of his right hand formed a circle and gestured to Miss Yinlong. Magic magnifying glass, come. Too close. Move further. Further away. Bigger magnification. No, I'm not asking you to make the magnifying glass bigger, I'm asking you to make the magnification bigger. Crooked. Crooked. Raise the left side a little higher. If you raise it a little higher, your hands will touch it. It will contaminate the lens. Facts have proved that the tacit understanding between Greet and Miss Silver Dragon still needs to be cultivated. Up and down, stumbling. The magnifying glass was finally adjusted to a comfortable position for Greet. Greet concentrated on it and began to anastomose the blood vessels. Brachial artery, cephalic vein, basilic vein. With one movement and two stillnesses, the anastomosis of the three blood vessels was completed, and the blood vessel clamp was ready to be opened. Cyrilla, prepare a healing spell. If he is dizzy, palpitating, or his eyesight goes black, cast a spell immediately. The blood volume has not been replenished and the blood pressure has not risen. Once the arteries are opened after the severed limb is reconnected, the patient's blood pressure will easily plummet. At this time, we can only rely on healing skills to support the scene. But he is imprisoned there, how do I know that he is dizzy and palpitating? This is a good question. If a person is under general anesthesia, you won't know if he faints. We should remove the blood pressure monitor as soon as possible. Please double the monthly pass. Please tip from 8 p.m. to 24 p.m. At that time, for every 1,500 starting coins as a reward, counting multiple people together, the author will receive 4 monthly tickets. Thanks to @bookfriend 202102192240150075 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @blackhand Stanley for the 500 starting coins reward. Thanks to @1115 for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 448. Gretel looked at Cyrilla. Cyrilla looked at Gretel. They looked at each other in silence. After a moment, Gretel hurriedly walked up behind him, and someone ran up to him. A skinny middle-aged healer squeezed out of the crowd and hurried to the front. "I'll come. I'll treat you. No need to save your healing power, leave the warriors of our village to me." A mid-level warrior. What a precious fighting force. There is nothing he can do if he can't do it himself. Someone can help. With a few healing spells, he lets the other party decide when to release them. Is he still a human being? Sirara chuckled. She counted silently in her heart, 1, 2, 3, sure enough, just after counting to 3, Gretel shouted. "Don't come here. Don't come here. Stay at least 3 feet away from the operating table. Don't come close." Greet really wished he could put up a force field barrier and divide the operating room into 2 sections. Hell, the sterility standards of the shelter cabin are not up to standard to begin with, yet these people are still trying to improve it. When you learn this magic, you must find a way to transform it into a laminar flow operating room. The middle-aged healer stood reflexively. He sang lowly and shook his bone staff. In the sound of chanting, the antlers on the head and the pine cones stuffed with moss on the head of the staff shone brightly at the same time. From dark brown to light brown, from light brown to reddish. A red light shrouded Sci-fi. At the same time, Gretel's thoughts moved slightly, and the hemostatic forceps formed by the mage's hands suddenly let go. The blood vessels were beating vigorously, and the bright red blood flowed along the brachial artery and poured into the newly connected arm. 89 pairs of eyes stared at the right arm. 1 second, 2 seconds. The middle-aged healer suddenly let out an exclamation and rushed towards him. He put his hands behind his back and hunched over his body, trying not to touch the operating table. A pair of eyes, but they want to stick to the palm of the severed hand. It's red, it's red. That pale, cold arm that had been away from the human body for at least 2 meals. From the palm to the fingertips, little by little, a faint blood color appeared. He beamed with joy. Behind him, the elders were pushing and shoving, and they all came together to take a look. Elder Brock even held his breath, stretched out his arm far away, and touched carefully with his fingertips. "It's warm, it's warm." According to the teacher's teachings and his own experience, when it becomes red and warm, the attached arm has already lived more than half of its life. And from the beginning to now, the Nordmark priest, the 5th level priest of the god of nature, has only used 1 healing spell. When joining the blood vessels, he didn't even release a formal spell, but just drew energy and used the silver rod to tap a little on the wound. If this can reconnect the severed limb, if, with such a small amount of effort, the arm can be reattached. Elder Brock trembled all over, his feather crown and feather cloak rustled, and they lit up slightly visible to the naked eye. Gretel immediately said, "Return to. How much dust is on your clothes?" He didn't even raise his head and continued to stare at the wound on his broken arm. The 3 major blood vessels, the brachial artery, cephalic vein, and basilic vein, are well filled. Reach out and touch your wrist. Under your fingertips, you can feel the rhythmic beating of your pulse. The skin began to turn red. He stretched out his hand to press it and then released it. The pale skin quickly returned to red. Although it took more than 2 seconds, it was already expected. The skin begins to gradually warm up. The broken end of the wound and the unanastomized small vein end were bleeding profusely. Very good. Blood circulation is restored. Seize the time to anastomose all the blood vessels, and then start repairing the muscles and tendons. Greet began to concentrate on his work again. The mage's hand deformed according to his mind, lengthening and narrowing, taking on the appearance of a long tweezer. It is about 18 centimeters in length and can be held comfortably in the hand, but the tip is less than a millimeter wide. The slender tip is equipped with tiny tweezers, which can firmly hold the blood vessel from the muscle and prevent it from loosening or slipping. Although the dwarves helped him use blood vessel clamps, it would be better to have more precise instruments used to repair blood vessels during limb replantation surgery. Besides, it's troublesome to sterilize the equipment in this wilderness. If you can shape it with the hands of a mage, you don't need to use ready-made equipment. Gretel held the mage's hand and moved forward while holding his breath. The tweezers opened and closed forward to clamp a blood vessel that was only thicker than a hair. Use force, use a little force, close it, pull it gently. The broken blood vessels, which can only be seen clearly under a magnifying glass, are held forward by the hands of the mage. Aligning the two sides, the other mage's hand holds the silver rod forward, and gently touches the glass wire at the end of the silver rod at the break. From the beginning to the end, the mage's hand hanging in the air did not shake at all. Obviously, the owner's spirit in controlling it is as strong as steel, without any slack or wavering. Sarala looked at it breathlessly. It wasn't until the blood vessel was connected that she took 2 deep breaths. "Greet, do you want to take a break? Isn't this too tiring?" "I'm fine," Greet said with a slight smile in his voice, without even raising his head. "Don't worry, this surgery is not tiring. I can support you." He is really not tired. Compared to the replantation of a severed limb in the previous life, compared to any major surgery in the previous life, today's surgery was much easier. If it was a previous life, the severed and defective blood vessels would require stitches to be sutured. The needle and thread used are only 1/3 as thick as a human hair, and the needle can be broken when inserted into the cloth. The doctor's hands must use a needle holder to hold a curved needle that is thinner than a hair. Continuous through suture, interrupted through suture, intussusception suture, a blood vessel needs to be sewn with 8 to 12 stitches. But now, all it takes is clamping, apposition, and treatment. A major surgery that takes more than 4 hours, can be shortened to less than 1 hour, or even shorter, with treatment. The translucent mage's hand moved gently in the air. The amplitude is so small that it is almost invisible to the naked eye. Occasionally, the tip of the mage's hand will shine with a little white light, smaller than a grain of rice, fainter than the tail of a firefly, and much more subtle than the first healing spell summoned by a priest's apprentice. However, at this point, in barely noticeable movements, blood vessels are anastomosed and muscles and tendons are repaired. The severed nerves were carefully sorted out, and then bundled one by one, and patiently and carefully combined. Radial nerve, ulnar nerve, median nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, axillary nerve, medial brachial cutaneous nerve, lateral brachial cutaneous nerve. They are crisscrossed and interconnected. Greet sat motionless, without raising his head, for hour after hour under the bright shadowless lamp. Cyril lay down and then sat up and then lay down again. Further away, the healers headed by Elder Brock switched from left foot to right foot to left foot. "Just, watching like this is really boring. I have no idea what he is doing." The elders have begun to whisper among themselves. "What do you think of this treatment? It's very time-consuming. I've seen Brock cast a spell and half an arm grew out of nothing. It only took a cup of tea. How long did he spend doing this? But this consumes so little. I can do it even if I see the spell fluctuations. But tell me, can we do it ourselves? It seems very simple, just do it every step of the way, just throw in the healing spell, but it feels like it needs to be very detailed, and I can't do it with those tools. Yeah, it looks simple, but I always feel that if I do it myself, I won't be able to handle it well. If he is willing to teach, maybe he can learn some of it, right? Then do you think he is willing to teach? In exchange for the totem spirit. Our tribe doesn't have any extras, how about saving one from several tribes and begging him to tell it to us together? What a good idea. Willard from the Bluebird tribe is my brother-in-law. I remember that there is also a Green Falcon spirit over there. Green Falcon is too strong, can't he be replaced? How about we ask the Grey River tribe? They swallowed up a small tribe a few years ago, and that family's raven is pretty good. The healers murmured among themselves. Sarah glanced over there without a trace, took another look, and secretly thought about what kind of spirit body she wanted to get for Gretel. It must have strong buffs, be able to fight, be beautiful, and have face when taken out. The best thing is to be furry. When Greet is in a daze, she can take the opportunity to catch him and stroke him. Well, I wonder who among these barbarians has a wolf spirit? The last time I picked a mount, Gretel seemed to be very interested in the silver wolf. The silver dragon girl's eyes were spinning wildly, one thought after another, murmuring upwards. Finally, Gretel straightened up and stretched greatly. Sarala, healing. After the skin is healed, just scan it from top to bottom again. Okay. The silver dragon girl jumped up energetically. Treat minor injuries, then treat minor injuries again, throw in a few balls of white light, and the skin damage, bruises and congestion are treated. Make another one to treat moderate injuries, from a punch high above the broken part of the arm to the fingertips at the bottom, and sweep it over bit by bit. Finally, pick up your arms and look through it again. No problem, okay. Hey, get up. With a clap of her delicate hands, the confinement technique was released. Sci-fi jumped off the floating saucer and touched his right arm with disbelief on his face, from top to bottom, from bottom to top, and then pinched each one from thumb to little finger. Real. It is true. You can feel it on both hands, on the fingertips of both hands. He waved his arms, clenched his fists, and then turned sideways to gain momentum. Before Greet could stop him, he saw him punch 2 times in the air, and the sound of breaking wind could be heard above his fists. Greet, don't move. Come here. Let me check your arm. Don't use too much force, start rehabilitation step by step, be careful that some areas haven't grown yet. Sci-fi turned to Gretel with a face full of ecstasy. With a thud, his body fell to the ground. When I raised my head again, my face was covered with tears. Sir. Benefactor. Sci-Way's life is yours from now on. Thank you, I don't really want it. By the way, how many contribution points can be counted by connecting the arm of such a mid-level warrior? Is it enough to exchange for 1/10 of a totem spirit? Please double the monthly pass. Please give me a reward. Today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, 3 nights, from 8 to 2400 hours, for every 1500 starting coins tipped, multiple people can add it up, the author will get 4 monthly tickets. When I was checking information today, I suddenly discovered that Professor Chen Zhongwei, who completed the world's first case of amputated limb replantation as mentioned in the first 2 chapters, fell to his death at the age of 75. The police speculated that they found keys and mobile phones lying around after going out. At home, I wanted to go back through the window to get it, but unfortunately I fell. 75-year-old gentleman, it is so unjust for you to die like this. Thanks to a shiny mushroom for the 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 449. To reconnect limbs, first of all, you need to know what kind of limbs can be reconnected. Generally speaking, for limbs that are severed at a high position, especially those that are partially separated from the upper arm or thigh, 6 hours after the break, that is, within half a day, you need to use my method can still be used. The elders asked to learn how to replant severed limbs, but Gretel didn't embarrass them at all. No bargaining, no additional conditions, no hooking up with a few people alone, or engaging in bidding and selling tickets to drive up the price. How many more people can attend a lecture? It doesn't matter, you can come if you want to hear it. Which totem spirit chooses? Wait until the lesson is over before choosing. When will the lecture start? When are you free to listen? As a result, the next night, the night when the big hunt ended, all the healers gathered in the largest tent. Gretel also specially called some soldiers over. They are at the forefront of the battle, and they are most likely to encounter severed hands, feet, and fingers. At least, they should know how to preserve the amputated limbs on the way back. So the warriors from each tribe crowded together and stood in 3 or 4 rows behind the tent. Gretel was so generous, but it was the elders' turn to feel embarrassed. In particular, barbarians and dwarves are both famous for their hospitality. Even if a traveler knocks on a door empty-handed, the host will feed him and drink him. Otherwise, it would be a disgrace to the owner. The reputation of being stingy spreads, and the entire tribe, and even all the tribes in this area, will be criticized. So which totem spirit should we choose for him? During the break, elders from 5 or 6 nearby villages, led by Elder Luyao, gathered together to discuss. The raven I mentioned before seems a bit out of control. Yeah, it feels like the green falcon is a little weaker. Otherwise, we go find Brock and replace him with his golden eagle. He refuses, right? He has worshipped the golden eagle for 20 years, and it seems that it is for his grandson. It is said that his grandson is a genius one seen in 100 years. When he was born, there were hundreds of birds on the top of the tent, hovering and chirping all day and all night. No matter which one it is, in short, it must be worthy of what he has done for us. Elder Gus' hand squeezed into the small circle, put down a huge skin bag with a plop. He shook his hand casually, and there was a lot of jingling and rattling in the bag. Some are crisp, some are dull, and some are dry. Listening to the sound, it seems that all kinds of gold and silver jewelry, various rare ores, and various medicinal materials and bones are all placed together. Is this a pocket full of money? Your Excellency Nordmark has cured half of our tribe. In other words, he has cured all our young men. These things were put together by the entire tribe. The totem spirits of whichever family he wants, these will be given to whichever family he wants remuneration. And mine, the old hunchback, who was no longer hunchbacked, also took out a leather bag. He is poor, his class is low, and his tribe does not have much money, but he has tried his best. Elder Luyao silently put down the third skin bag. The person Lord Nordmark had used to replace his arm was one of the only 2 mid-level warriors in their tribe. This medical expense cannot be ignored. Wait a minute, we are just collecting money here. Does anyone know what kind of totem this healer wants? This. Gretel's lecture on replanting severed limbs lasted 3 days. After the big hunt, on the way back to the gathering place, after setting up camp every night, the elders had their hands free and rushed into the big tent. It's rare for someone to explain it in such detail. The first day talks about the preservation and debridement of severed limbs, the second day talks about the connection of bones, blood vessels, muscles and nerves, and the third day is about actual combat. The elders who were interested in practicing each picked a beast, cut off a leg, and began to repair it under Gretel's guidance. When preparing physiological saline, use boiled water. Or boil it after preparing it. It is not possible to use raw water. Concentration. Pay attention to concentration. Look at the life and death of the blood vessels. If they are not the normal pink color, lose their luster, or lose their normal smoothness and elasticity and become soft and curved, the blood vessels are dead. If they are dead, they cannot be used. They must be cut off, and the blood vessels must be cut off. Cut off a centimeter or 2 upward. If you can't see clearly, use a magnifying glass. Don't you have a magnifying glass? Don't merchants bring them to sell? Then you can consider using the eagle eye spell or similar spells. I personally don't recommend using the giant enlargement spell. I haven't done any experiments, so I'm not sure. What are the additional risks of making a severed limb larger or smaller? The congestion in the blood vessels needs to be flushed out. Oh, You don't have a syringe dash. Dozens of pairs of eyes watched Greet take out a bell, hold it in his hand and rub it, rub it. Holding his throat, he said in a strange tone. Time is money, my friend. A wisp of blue smoke rises from the bell. Then, Greet tossed the gold coins one by one in exchange for syringes, and distributed them to each elder without hesitation. See it? I saw it. He spent 10 gold coins. We have to pay them back. That's for sure. Double the amount. Well, I don't have gold coins, only a gold bowl. In 3 days, more and more elders were willing to chip in for the totem spirit. Finally, Elder Brock of the host tribe gathered everyone together and proposed an exchange plan. What I mean is that all of us take out the totem spirits that can be freed and are temporarily unused, and let him choose whatever he chooses. Whichever one is picked is the one. We will collectively evaluate the value of the totem spirit, and then we will work together make it up to the master. How about that? No problem. Listen to you. The money collected by so many tribes must be enough. Whoever is chosen, the master will not suffer any loss. Everyone, please bring out the totem spirits. Let the healer choose the one you like. If anyone is stingy, everyone will despise him. So, after waiting for the large group of people to return to the gathering place, Greet slept comfortably and got up early the next morning. I saw 2 rows of totem poles placed at the door of his residence, one to the left and one to the right. The tall one is more than 2 meters, and the short one is less than 1.5 meters. Each one is covered with thick coating. Ropes were tangled and colorful flags were flying. It was placed in front of his door like this, and the height was specially adjusted to make it roughly symmetrical. Greet stood at the door, looking both ways, and suddenly felt that he was in the wrong place. No, when I traveled to the Ming Xiaoling Mausoleum, there were pairs of stone camels, stone horses, stone civil servants and stone military attaches on both sides of the tomb passage. They seemed to be arranged symmetrically like this. No, they were placed at my door. What about me? Who am I? Your Excellency Nordmark Elder Yuguan smiled. Surrounded by a group of elders, he smiled frankly and raised his hand to the 2 rows of totem poles in front. The entire Akula, all the uncontracted totem spirits are here. You can choose at will, and take whichever one you like. You don't have to consider the price. What you paid before, can be exchanged for any of them. Huh? So generous? Take your pick. Does anyone else have any opinions? Gretel's eyes instantly lit up. He looked behind Elder Yuguan and saw that the healers who had attended the class 2 days ago but not the healers who had not attended the class were standing in several rows. Seeing him looking over, everyone nodded vigorously. Feel free to pick. That raven belongs to our tribe. We took it out willingly. The one who picked us? The white wolf of our tribe is the most powerful one. Everyone will pay the compensation for being selected together. No one will suffer. Don't worry. Oh, no one will suffer, that would be great. Greet raised a smile, nodded to everyone, and walked towards the totem pole closest to him. It was short and squat, only reaching the height of his chest, and the top was rubbed round and round. What on earth is the totem spirit inside? He closed his eyes, unfolded his spiritual power, and touched the spirit body in the totem pole. Immediately, a loud roar came from the meditation world, thick, hoarse, and deafening. Bah! A crow. Greet, don't want this. The silver dragon girl shouted from the side. Gretel nodded and continued walking. Good, he doesn't really want crows either. This thing made him feel too rough, not kind, or gentle at all. A little fox jumped out of the second totem pole. The hair was crimson and he rolled as soon as he hit the ground. Greet's heart moved, and he used his spiritual power, but the fox flicked its tail and ran away. Run a few steps, jump high, and plunge headfirst into the snow. Greet's mental energy chased and intercepted him, and the fox ran all over the place, but ignored him. After trying 3 times in a row and failing 3 times, Gretel shook his head, gave up communicating, and continued to move forward. In the third totem pole was a white wolf. Touched by Gretel's spiritual power, he looked up and walked over gracefully. The white wolf reached Greet's chest at shoulder height, stretched out his head, sniffed twice, and licked his cheek directly. Greet couldn't help but smile. He stretched out his hands in his meditation vision, hugged the white wolf's neck, and stroked it hard. The hair that the mind can sense is rich and moist, as bright as silver, and just looking at it makes people extremely excited. Choose it. Greet, choose it, Cyrilla shouted happily from the side. Gretel hesitated for a moment, and tried to use his mental power to communicate with the white wolf, instructing him to shrink, shrink, and shrink again. Well, he couldn't do it. What about observing inside the human body? What, you can't do it either. So I'm sorry, I can't choose you. Greet hugged the white wolf for the last time in the meditation field, and resolutely disconnected. If he can contract 2 at the same time, and if his mental power can bear 2 at the same time, he can still try to go back and find it, but now, forget it. He picked and moved on. Raven, no. Beaver, no. Mouse, no. Golden eagle, no. Hey, what is this? It's actually a ferret. So cute. The whole body is snow white, except for a little bit of black on the tip of the tail. When it stands up, it is round and cute. Moreover, the small face is less than the size of a palm. When exploring the inside of the human body, it feels like there is no need to make it smaller. Come, let's communicate. Gretel stretched out his hand again in his meditation vision. When I woke up, 2 alliance leaders were added. Shocked. Additional updates will be returned one after another. We'll definitely pay it back. And I am asking for monthly votes. Now I have 2,735 votes. I hope I can reach 3,000 votes this month. You can draw prizes 3 times. It's just a little bit closer. During the double period, everyone should vote for me. Swipe backwards on the app to see a ferret. Thanks to it like a black and white silent film, at Bugfield for the 100,000 starting coins and the 6th and 7th league leaders, leave leaders plus 10 chapters, I'll remember it, and will pay it back one after another after this one is repaid. Thanks to it and book friend 201810072225361221 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to at Shiny Mushroom for tipping 298 starting coins. Thanks to at Gozera 1975, at Wang Xiaoxiang 1115, at book friend 201812051045111742 for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 450. Gretel subconsciously took a step forward, looking excited. The little guy seen in the meditation field of vision has a round face, round nose, and round ears. Standing upright and looking around, he is as cute as an elf. The fur is all white, and the black dot on the tip of the tail is flicking non-stop. Almost every detail of his body is full of cuteness. On the right, Miss Silver Dragon also made a cute sound. She was even less able to resist the little ferret. She squatted down and stretched out her right hand forward. Her silver blue eyes were slightly straightened, and it was obvious that she had also entered the meditative field of vision. The elders looked sideways. This totem spirit is contracted to the healer. Why are you, Miss Elf, more excited than the healer? If the totem spirit wants to materialize, it will consume a lot of mental energy of the contractor. Do you want to take it out and play with it every day? Lord Newardmark, don't you just agree to whatever she chooses? Forget it, as long as you two are happy. Amidst the silence, some people still raised objections. From the back row of the caster's phalanx, an old man squeezed out, limping and with a sad face. Seeing Gretel staring at the totem pole and unable to move his eyes away, he hesitated again and whispered. Lord Nordmark, well, contracting this ferret is quite troublesome. You'd better be more careful. Old man, what's wrong? Gretel pulled his eyes out of the world of meditation and turned to the old man. Cautious. What's the situation? Is there anything wrong with this ferret? Although the giants of the Mustlety family seem to be quite capable of fighting, stoats are said to be able to hunt prey 10 times their own body weight, and dare to confront wolves for their prey. However, these are all totem spirits, so they won't be aggressive with him, right? Hey, Your Excellency, the old man bent down subconsciously. He rubbed his waist and eyes and pressed hard, as if there was pain there all the time. This ferret, you have to make a contract with it and pass its test. First, you have to dance with it. What? The old man smiled bitterly and made a few gestures, but he didn't know what to say, so he could only shake his head. Gretel didn't know why, so he nodded to him with a smile and turned his attention back to the stoat spirit. The mental power extended over and expressed the wish for contact to the ferret, and then, it suddenly froze. The stoat ran wildly. Jump high and dive down. Jump to the other side. Stand up and rock like crazy. Then, he suddenly fell down, rolled a few times, rubbed his back a few times on his back, jumped up again, and ran away again. In short, the whole thing is in a weird state of movement of madness and convulsions and Brownian motion. Greed stood there and watched, completely unable to understand what it wanted to do or what its appeal was. I tried to contact with my mental power, and the vague feedback I got seemed to be follow me. What's following you? Have a convulsion with you? The spirit of the ferret tormented the boss crazily. Not seeing any reaction, he suddenly rushed to Gretel. Stand upright, flop down, and turn on your belly. The 4 little paws scratched and scratched, as if to seduce Greed. Come play with me. Come touch me. Gretel stared at it and hesitated for a moment, then carefully squatted down and stretched out his fingertips to scratch its belly. Before his fingers could reach it, a white light flashed before his eyes, and the ferret suddenly disappeared. Then, there seemed to be a slight tingling sensation on the back of the neck. Huh! Greed stretched out his hand to catch it, but found nothing. A wisp of breeze seemed to flow between the fingers. I wonder if it was the fur of the spirit body brushing past. Then, the ferret landed not far ahead again, arched its back and bared its teeth at him. Gretel stretched out his spiritual power again, trying to lure it closer, but it refused anyway. Well. The old man sighed deeply. Looking back on the past, I still feel uncomfortable looking back. If you can't keep up with its war dance and can't catch it, it won't make a contract with you. Back then, I just wanted to make a contract with it, but ended up with a back injury, oops. So that convulsive jump is the so-called war dance. Gretel shook his head and exited the meditative state. The boss of the weasel family, he looks cute and has high fighting ability, but unfortunately, his compatibility is not the same. Escape, and find another one. He continued walking down the totem pole, testing each one by one. The footsteps behind him did not follow. Greet looked back and saw the silver dragon girl's eyes shining as she squatted opposite the totem pole. Do you want it? Fine. Even if Sarala takes a liking to the ferret and wants to take it away with him, that's okay. At worst, he could just spend more money on technology and replace it. Speaking of which, can those barbarian healers learn the spell to accurately kill parasites? Greed touched his technical reserves and continued to move forward with confidence. Deer, no. Toad, no. Next. Empty. Is there no totem spirit that inhabits this totem pole? Gretel stood still and searched carefully with his mental power, only to find a small snake at the bottom of the totem pole. The chopsticks are thick and thin, coiled in a circle, and occupy an area less than the size of a palm. Black matter and white seal, no. Conversely, this snake should have white matter and black seal. The translucent spirit body is looming, and if you don't pay attention, you can ignore it. The triangular head of the snake spirit was raised and shaking slightly, and the snake letter flashed and flickered at him. Gretel subconsciously took out the oak staff from his chest pocket and compared it with it. Hey, they seem to be about the same size. Suddenly there was a flower in front of my eyes. The snake spirit with black flowers on a white background flicked its bow and shot like a sharp arrow. Don't bite me. Gretel subconsciously blocked it with his oak staff. Looking closely, the little snake curled up and quietly coiled around the oak staff. The head is lowered and hovering downward, without any intention of biting. Gretel had a thought in his mind. The oak staff slightly enlarged, and the shadow of the snake spirit also enlarged. It shrank back to the size of a ballpoint pen, and the little snake followed it like a shadow. Then it shrank and immediately returned to the thickness of chopsticks. The fit is incredibly high, as if it was born to be a circle of decoration on the oak staff. Gretel took a deep breath. He closed his eyes, let go of his mental power, and contacted the little snake. Do you like me? Do you want to follow me? Can you be my partner, my eyes, to help me observe the patient's condition and assist me in treatment? Almost immediately, a cool feeling penetrated silently from the opposite side. Gretel raised his head slightly, relaxed and savored the feeling. It felt like I was dizzy after working all night, and when I walked out of the emergency room building, I was blown by the morning breeze on my face. It seemed like a department team building exercise, where I hiked up a mountain road for an hour and drank a bottle of ice-cold mineral water. It's like being operated on for several hours. When I feel dizzy, I hold a bag of glucose in my mouth and drink it all in one breath. The abundant and comfortable feeling made him close his eyes and let out a long breath involuntarily. This viper spirit is the contract partner of a great healer from the previous generation. At some point, the old man with feather crowns had already walked up to him and explained softly. I was still a child at that time, and I often watched it bring herbs in its mouth to help its owner cure diseases. It is said that it only needs to taste the common herbs in the wilderness to know what diseases it can cure. Snakehead. A natural healing magic pet. Is it really okay to be taken away by him like this? You know, the healing power of barbarians is still very lacking. As if seeing his doubts, the old man Yuguan sighed softly and said in a low voice. It's a pity that his disciples are more focused on fighting and are not very interested in healing, so they are not in harmony with the snake spirit. None of the subsequent disciples can win the favor of the snake spirit. It has been decades now. Well, this just doesn't add up. Just like that ferret, although it's cute, it doesn't get along with him. Greed sighed silently. In this case, it would be a good idea for this viper spirit to follow him. Speaking of which, he knows very little about the herbs in this world, and they complement each other exactly. So, I will make a contract with it. Please. Following the instructions of the old man Yuguan, Gretel stood next to the totem pole, his hands pressed against the wooden pole, completely immersed in it. Around them, 4 elders drew on the ground with ink prepared from animal blood, medicinal powder, and minerals. Wait a minute, relax your mind first and get ready. When the painting is finished, I will personally preside over the contract ceremony. Elder Brock babbled and directed his disciples to bring out various things and place them in designated locations in the magic circle. There were teeth, horns, fruits, and powder that Gretel didn't recognize. Then, he took off a small leather bag from his waist, carefully took out ores and gems of various colors, and put them into the magic circle one by one. Gretel glanced at it casually and saw suspected rubies, emeralds, sapphires, amethysts, amber, and agate. Although the quality is hard to describe, it is quite difficult to assemble these things in the wilderness. Well, this is unnecessary, right? It's too expensive. What you want is what you want. The more powerful the totem spirit is, the more arduous the test is for the master. If the master's spirit body has not been there for a long time, it will even drain the master's spiritual power. These magic circles and sacrifices are both restraints and protection. That's not what I meant. Gretel left the totem pole with both hands, picked up the oak staff, and shook it left and right. I mean, I seem to have completed the contract with it. In front of everyone's eyes, the spirit snake slowly appeared on the oak staff as long as the eyebrow staff. The snake's tail hooked the end of the oak staff, and the snake's body coiled around until it was under the handle. Its head poked out, and the snake hesitated. Greet tilted his head and looked up and down. The more he looked, the more satisfied he became. A simple oak staff, with green leaves waving on the head and snakes coiled around the body, this is the symbol of the medical system. This viper spirit should be his partner by nature. What's your name? He asked softly in his mind. Do you have a name? What name did your previous master, or first master, give you? No. Then, you need me to give you one. Please double the monthly pass. Please give me a reward. Today, tomorrow, these 2 nights, from 8 to 2400 hours, for every 1500 starting coins that are rewarded, it counts if multiple people put it together, the author will get 4 monthly tickets. Remember to reward at night? I received a message from the leader this morning and lost 132 monthly tickets. I feel so sad. The author wants to collect 3,000 monthly tickets this month and be able to draw prizes 3 times, Thanks to @DeepDW for the 1500 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 451. With the snake staff in hand, Gretel looked around and suddenly felt refreshed. My waist is no longer sore, my legs are no longer painful, and the way others look at me, is different. It was as if his whole body lit up and was filled with layers of sacred halo. Hey, you don't think I'm possessed by the god of medicine, do you? It shouldn't be so. There is no legend of Asclepius, the god of medicine, in this world. However, if I work hard and increase my reputation, maybe I can turn the snake staff into a symbol of medical treatment in this world. Greet held the snake staff and thought wildly. He wanted to try the snake spirit's function. He looked left and right, then stopped. The feet are round, square, and horizontal. The contract circle has just been drawn more than halfway, and there are still a lot of scattered materials in it. Greet estimated that he had no ballet skills at all. If he stepped out on tiptoes, he would definitely step on something. As for jumping out? Sorry, he has failed in the standing long jump since junior high school. Looking down, 2 apprentices were lying at their feet. One was collecting materials in the magic circle, and the other was carrying a small shovel and following behind to shovel the soil. What a pity, these sacrificial supplies can be recycled and reused, and the animal blood and medicinal powder used to draw the magic circle are wasted. 2 other warriors rolled up their sleeves and stood far away on the opposite side, gearing up to move the totem pole. By the way, this pillar, do I have to take it with me? It looks so heavy. This pillar is used to store the spirit of the totem. Especially when the caster has insufficient strength or is out of gear, the spirit of the totem can be attached to the pillar, and the entire tribe can offer sacrifices to it not far away. The old man with feather crowns spoke slightly. Laugh. A priest like you can directly supply it with spiritual power without having to carry a pillar around. Oh. Gretel was relieved. Indeed, there are many ways to accommodate incorporeal and spiritual bodies in the council. Go back and get one. Let the pillars and other things stay here for the next tribe to use. Greet waited patiently and waited. Fortunately, the apprentice who was packing his things was considerate and quick, and cleared a way for him first. Greet rushed out with the snake staff. As soon as he jumped out, he was stopped by the old man with a feather crown and said with a smile, "Lord Nordmark, what's the matter with you?" "Ah, I'm going to try the snake spirit. Try to see if the totem spirit's addition to mental power is enough to satisfy the electromagnetic diagram, then try the totem spirit itself, get into the human body and explore the internal scene, and see what you can see. After all the hard work this time, how could I not give it a try when I got something? Since this is an experiment, could you please take a tour of our tribe?" Elder Brock smiled, his face full of kindness. Gretel understood what he meant. It was rare to have a different healer, so he could do a lot of free examinations, and maybe even a few free treatments. "But Elder, do you know that your face is exactly the same as that of the director who once said to him, 'Your symptoms are very typical, let the students take a look,' and then summoned a bunch of medical students." Even though it brought back some bad memories, Gretel did not refuse. He held the snake staff and followed the elder into the residential area of the host tribe. Stepping into the first door, he reflexively cast a bubble spell on himself, and then quietly dissipated it while no one was paying attention. In the wilderness, even for relatively powerful tribes, the accommodation conditions are not worth looking forward to. Most of the houses are made of animal bones as supporting columns, with mud bricks on the walls and covered with animal skins on the top. A large family, men, women, old and young, lived in the same house and even slept on the same earthen bed. Wealthier families have animal skin curtains to separate the tukang, while poorer families don't even have animal skin curtains. Stepping in, the smell of aging. Gretel had no choice but to endure the smell and check one by one. No way, things like smell are also very important clinical indicators and should not be ignored. For example, diabetic foot, such as the rotten apple smell of ketoacidosis, almost as soon as you smell it, you know what is going on. Besides, as a doctor, preventing patients from feeling abandoned is also an important part of doctor-patient communication. Gretel checked them one by one. It must be admitted that the old man Yugwan is an extremely powerful healer. The tribes under his care have injuries that cannot be treated by any healing technique and cannot be cured simply because the treatment power is insufficient. Greet checked all the way, and the thing he caught the most was actually a parasite. What else is there to say? Do a fecal examination and use the proliferative technique to quickly cultivate adult worms. Then, take all kinds of bugs and use magic to sweep them away one by one. Gretel pinched his nose and worked hard. After scanning 3 or 5 people, Elder Brock and his apprentices stopped him diligently. "Have a rest, we will do the work." "How can you do this kind of dirty work, Hadra? Why are you just standing there? Why don't you pour some water for Mr. Nodmark?" "Gretel, I think you just want to learn this spell to cure parasites. There's no need to go through such a big detour. Bring me an animal skin. I'll just draw the magic structure for you. Think of it as a gift in return for drawing the contract magic circle." As a result, the treatment work finally turned into Elder Brock holding the magic scroll and imitating it, while Gretel was drinking tea and giving guidance. He mobilized the snake spirit and carefully patrolled the patient's body to see if the liver flukes, roundworms, and pork tapeworms had been killed. "Oh, by the way, do an electrocardiogram and observe the fluctuation of the patient's vital signs. Elder Brock is not proficient in magic, and things can go wrong from time to time." The patient's face turned pale in pain, the patient rolled on the bed, the patient fainted. Early monitoring, early detection, and early treatment are good for everyone. By the way, with the snake spirit plug-in, Gretel's electrocardiogram time has been gratifyingly extended from half a minute to 5 minutes. With a little saving, it can already be used to monitor vital signs during the most critical period of the operation. Treat, guide, and experiment with new tools. Elder Brock's tribe is the most powerful tribe in this area, with a large population and can even afford to support many elderly people. Gretel treated people of all ages and genders along the way and collected a lot of data. His endless ink pen was wrapped around the oak staff and kept flying on the notebook, recording as cheerfully as he could. Looking at this progress, after going through the entire tribe, the snake spirit is almost familiar? Greet thought silently between treatments. However, this idea soon disappeared. Can't the child be born? Gretel looked at Elder Brock with dull eyes and asked the young man in front of him, what is the situation now? She should have given birth a long time ago, but she hasn't started giving birth yet. The young man, who must be the husband of the pregnant woman, was sweating profusely. In the cold weather at the turn of autumn and winter, white steam billows from his forehead. It's been almost half a month, and I'm really worried that something will happen to her. I understand, I'll go take a look. Elder Yuguan stood up calmly. He followed the young man and walked towards the house where the pregnant woman was. As he walked, he asked Greet. Lord Nordmark, is there any way you can help her? I'm not a gynecologist, Greet roared silently in his heart and shook his head decisively. The four major subspecialties of internal medicine, and children's medicine have independent examinations for each other's scope of practice. When encountering pregnant women, our emergency department's usual approach is to save the patient's life, and then call for gynecological emergency consultation. Besides, labor hasn't started yet, so all I know is to give oxytocin, and I don't have any medicine on hand. Elder Yuguan smiled and did not continue to ask. Walking to the patient's residence, as soon as he opened the door curtain, painful moans could be heard. The pregnant woman was standing on the earthen bed with her face covered in sweat. Looking at her belly, she looked like she was already full term. The only thing Gretel could do was to quickly cast an electrocardiogram magic. Well, my heart rate is a little fast, which is natural, but it's not so fast that it's abnormal. He doesn't know the fetal position unless he is asked to do a B ultrasound. However, the husband of a pregnant woman may not want him to touch her belly. Greet glanced quietly. When Elder Brock leaned over, the young man was already a little reluctant. Child, don't be afraid, the gods will always protect you. Elder Brock used a healer to replenish the pregnant woman's strength, then took out a small bag from the inside of the robe and poured out some powder. Here, drink it. What is this? Greet poked her head curiously. The pregnant woman drank the powder obediently, but her condition did not improve much, and there were no signs of immediate labor. When no one was paying attention, Greet pulled Elder Brock to a secluded place behind the house and asked him quietly. What is that medicine made of? That. Elder Brock looked around again. If other tribe elders, or even his own disciples, asked, they would definitely not reveal the secret recipe unless absolutely necessary. However, this generous human healer could exchange it. He straightened his clothes and smiled reservedly. That is our tribe's secret recipe. Pumpkin seeds, gourd pulp, and goshawk excrement are mixed together to promote childbirth. It must be the condor of our tribe for the excrement to be effective. Don't tell others. What? Gretel was shocked. Is this okay? Is this useful? In fact, it's really useless. The pregnant woman tossed and turned for almost an hour, her breath getting weaker and weaker. Seeing that the situation was not good, Elder Brock had no choice but to come up with a new secret recipe. The liquid that made her fertile can also prompt her to give birth. Let her husband go, at $%. A series of operations with sounds that involve the neck below and must be 404 ed off. Gretel was stunned. No, wait. Theoretically, Prostaglandins do have the effect of promoting cervical ripening and softening, that is to say, they can indeed induce labor. However, your operation is too rough. You might as well let me do it. At least, I can still get through a relatively simple cesarean section. It's doubled on the last day. Please give me monthly votes, recommendation votes, book reviews, and all kinds of things. And, the above two secret recipes have indeed appeared in reality, except that the first one is the secret recipe of the Aztec tribe, and the second one seems to be from a certain tribe in Africa.